Can you clarify with whom the US is speaking? With China, they're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening. Well, it happened behind closed doors. No grand statement, no televised rebuke, just a brief communiqué delivered through diplomatic back panels and trade liaison. There will be no further negotiations unless all tariffs are removed. Not reduced, not reviewed, removed entirely. Beijing wasn't asking, it was drawing a line. The message hit Washington like a silent thunderclap. US officials already prepping for the next round of trade discussions in Geneva were blindsided. Overnight calendars were cleared, flights were canceled, and most importantly, the leverage shifted. Because for the first time in over a year of escalating tariffs, threats, and retaliations, China just walked away from the table. What triggered the snap? Insiders point to President Trump's latest tariff expansion. $90 billion worth of Chinese electronics, metals, EV components, and rare earths slapped with new import taxes under the guise of protecting American industry. But for Beijing, this wasn't economic defense, this was provocation. Within 72 hours of the new tariff announcement, China's Ministry of Commerce issued its ultimatum. There would be no trade dialogue, no meetings, no backroom settlements unless every new and existing tariff was lifted. The Wall Street Journal called it the most direct standoff since the original trade war began. CNBC dubbed it Beijing's economic veto, and Bloomberg's morning brief simply read, "Talks off. China says wait." Markets didn't wait, futures slid, semiconductor stocks dipped, treasury yields flickered. But the deeper tremor wasn't economic, it was strategic. This wasn't a tantrum, this was a chess move because, timing really matters. And China chose its moment carefully. The United States is facing an election year, a fragile post-recession recovery, and unrest among key voter blocs, especially farmers and manufacturers. China knows this, and by pulling the rug from trade talks now, it's turning economic screws into political ones. The result? Trump's trade war has become his campaign's time bomb. No other nation has ever dictated terms like this in a live negotiation, said David Chow, senior analyst at S&P Global. It's a clear signal. Beijing's done playing defense. And unlike past rounds where China responded with counter tariffs or import switches, this is different. This is silence. No threats, no retaliation, just a closed door. It's a playbook move from ancient diplomacy: deny access, create uncertainty, and let your opponent unravel from within. So, the world is watching, not because China said no, but because they said nothing else. And now, as the United States scrambles to regroup, one question echoes from Wall Street to Washington. If China is not bluffing, what comes next? The stakes aren't just high, they're structural. With China's ultimatum freezing negotiations, the fallout reaches far beyond tariff charts and GDP forecasts. What's in play now is nothing short of global trade architecture, and the United States could be staring at a fault line at the center of it all. $700 billion, 0 cents, in annual US-China trade volume. This isn't some side hustle on the world economy, it's the backbone of supply chains, from iPhones in California to tractors in Kansas. And the tariff standoff threatens to snap that spine. China's demand, a full rollback of all US tariffs, isn't just bold, it's unprecedented. If the United States complies, it risks looking weak ahead of elections. If it refuses, it risks cutting itself off from its largest trading partner and watching global competitors swoop in to fill the vacuum. Already, the warning signs are flashing red. Apple suppliers are shifting orders to Vietnam. Midwest soybean exports are down 18% quarter over quarter. EV battery makers are warning of cost spikes as rare earth imports hang in limbo. This is a pressure cooker and it's hissing louder by the hour. The Chinese are playing a long game, said Mingling Xu, senior strategist at the Eurasia Group, and they know America's election calendar better than some U.S. senators. This wasn't just economic retaliation, it's precision timing, and it shows. With inflation still bruising American households, the tariffs on Chinese consumer goods, from electronics to appliances, act like a slow poison. Washing machines, smartphones, electric scooters, all costlier now. And voters, they're noticing. In key swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, manufacturing lobbies have begun pressing lawmakers to reconsider the administration's hardline approach. Behind closed doors, Fortune 500 CEOs are urging for de-escalation, warning of layoffs if supply routes remain choked. But here's the paradox. The very tariffs meant to punish China are beginning to hurt the U.S. economy from within. Retailers warn of empty shelves by Q4. Logistics firms are reporting rerouted shipments and shipping cost hikes of up to 28%, and farmers, they're back on the front lines again. "We're the ones who take the hit first," said Susan Keller, a soybean grower from Indiana. "They fight, we bleed." What China has done, intentionally or not, is expose the fragility of American economic resilience. The United States may be a global power, but when supply chains snap and buyers disappear, even giants stumble. And the worst part? This may just be round one. Because the real question isn't can the United States afford to back down, it's can it afford not to. This wasn't a tantrum, this was a move years in the making. Beijing's decision to slam the brakes on trade talks didn't come out of frustration. It came from preparation. For over a decade, China has quietly fortified its economy, rewired its partnerships, and studied exactly how to absorb the blow of a US-led tariff war. The result? What looks like a bold ultimatum is actually a calculated play. First, timing. China didn't respond instantly after the United States raised tariffs. It waited deliberately, right until the U.S. economy began showing signs of strained inflation fatigue, election year uncertainty, and recession whispers. That's when they moved, not in anger, in advantage. Second, leverage. Unlike past trade standoffs, China didn't rush to match tariffs tit for tat. Instead, they used non-tariff tools, blocking negotiations, withholding export licenses, tightening rare earth shipments, and canceling key meetings. They made the United States look like it was arguing with a wall. No escalation, no engagement, just silence and the echo of uncertainty. The real power move isn't retaliation, said Yuan Tang, professor of international trade at Tsinghua University. It's forcing your opponent to punch into thin air. Third, insulation. Over the last 5 years, China has diversified trade flows, doubling imports from Latin America, expanding BRICS plus deals, and locking in agricultural and energy contracts with Russia, Pakistan, and Argentina. It's not just shifting suppliers, it's shifting alliances. China no longer needs to win the trade war. It just needs to outlast it. And most of all, Beijing understands America's weakness, political impatience. In China, long-term plans are measured in decades. In Washington, election cycles. By turning up the heat in an election year, China isn't just testing the economy, it's testing the limits of American political resolve. So when China says no, talks until the tariffs go, it's not a plea. It's a power move. One built on patience, one built on preparation, and one that leaves the ball and the pressure squarely in Washington's court. The White House didn't blink, at least not at first. Press Secretary Maria Caldwell called China's demand for full tariff rollback unrealistic and reaffirmed the administration's position. Tariffs will remain until Beijing demonstrates fair trade behavior. But behind the podium, urgency was setting in. President Trump, who once boasted that trade wars were easy to win, now faced a diplomatic freeze from the world's second-largest economy. His economic team scrambled to spin the situation as a negotiation tactic, not a breakdown. But on Wall Street, they weren't buying it. The Dow slid 600 points in 2 days. Treasury Secretary Mark Walker had to reassure markets that the door remains open. Yet no one could deny the new reality. China had shut that door first. Allies took notice too. Germany's foreign minister expressed deep concern over the standoff, warning it could ripple through the fragile post-pandemic global supply chain. Japan, heavily dependent on both U.S. and Chinese markets, called for immediate de-escalation. And in Brussels, EU officials admitted they were now revisiting contingency plans to buffer against a prolonged U.S.-China cold trade war. But it wasn't just politicians reacting. CEOs, bankers, and logistics chiefs were suddenly on high alert. Apple warned that ongoing tariffs could delay upcoming product rollouts. Caterpillar issued a revised earnings forecast, citing Asia-Pacific uncertainty. And the National Retail Federation sent an open letter to Congress demanding relief from what it called self-inflicted economic wounds. Even among conservative circles, support began to splinter. "I've backed this administration since day one," said Senator Marcus Ellis of Iowa, "but my farmers are drowning under canceled contracts. We can't negotiate from a silo." Meanwhile, China remained silent. No counterstatements, no clarification, no apology. Just silence and confidence. The global takeaway. This isn't just about trade. It's about who sets the rules in a rapidly shifting economic order. And with Beijing refusing to play ball and Washington struggling to hold its line, the world is watching, not for who makes the loudest move, but for who can afford to wait longer. The question now isn't what's happened, it's what's coming. With negotiations frozen and both superpowers standing their ground, the trade war has entered a new, colder phase. One defined not by shouting matches or tariff tallies, but by something more dangerous: strategic silence. Beijing's move wasn't just about the present, it was about laying the foundation for a future where China doesn't need the United States to survive, or even to grow. Its pivot toward Brazil, Russia, and BRICS Plus nations isn't just tactical, it's existential. And it sends a chilling signal: the decoupling isn't theoretical anymore, it's happening. Meanwhile in Washington, the reality is setting in. You can't negotiate if the other side has left the room. You can't pressure a rival that's already built a backdoor. And perhaps most importantly, you can't win a war that your opponent isn't even fighting anymore. So, what does that leave the United States with? A political crisis brewing at home, a fractured supply chain abroad, and a trade war that's rapidly turning into economic isolation. Trade analysts now warn that if tariffs remain through the next quarter, the United States could face a cascading impact: layoffs in logistics and export sectors, commodity price hikes during the holiday cycle, and a spike in consumer inflation right before the elections. But the real danger, it's not soybeans, not steel, not even semiconductors, it's the dollar. Because if China succeeds in building alternative trade corridors and deepening currency swaps through BRICS Plus and bilateral deals, the next thing they might walk away from is the U.S. financial system itself. A post-dollar world isn't here yet, but this standoff, it may be the opening move. As one veteran diplomat put it, Beijing isn't walking away from the table, they're flipping it over and building a new one somewhere else. So ask yourself, if China no longer needs U.S. trade to thrive, can America afford to keep fighting a war that no one else is still in? Because this isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of something bigger.